5 books to better understand philosophy. Book number 1 is The Story of Philosophy by Will Durrant. I think this is the good book not because it's going to be technical about the theories and ideas, because it will introduce you to a general framework of the individual philosophers. A lot of the time, in order to understand a particular worldview or philosophical doctrine or branch, you could say, you really have to understand the philosophers that were reasoning in that branch. Usually people will refer to a particular period by talking about 3 specific philosophers. Like if you think about German idealism, you might think about Schopenhauer or Immanuel Kant, for example. And so that will be really good in this book. He also links earlier ideas to more modern ideas, like the relationship between Socrates and, say, Francis Bacon. He talks about that in this book, and it's written well. So this is one book that I'd recommend people start with. Another book I recommend to people is Theory and Reality, The Philosophy of Science, an introduction to the philosophy of science. I like this book because it is precisely a philosophy of science, and it goes over the different ideas used in philosophy of science in a very natural way. It isn't like sometimes in philosophy you'll get people who introduce concepts using, let's say, formal logic, or they'll do it in a very abstract way. He keeps it very concrete. He writes really well, actually. He keeps it very concrete, and the ideas are nice and simple, and it goes over the different theories used in science to justify the evidence that they're given, which I thought was really cool and fun to read. It's short too, so yeah, I recommend this book to people. Another book I recommend to people is Pragmatism, The Cambridge Companion. I like this book because it's basically very systematic about pragmatism, and there's essays or papers in here that give very interesting critiques to pragmatism that weren't necessarily obvious to me. A good one was that pragmatism can oftentimes be considered empiricism, because some pragmatists will say whatever works, whatever we can verify as working, right, is what counts as true or useful. But that's kind of like a sneaky way of saying verificationism, or whatever we can verify up against reality. It can be very muddied if you're not clear about your pragmatism, and that's a critique given against pragmatists. Now there's an Italian pragmatist in here who says, yeah, but that misses the point, and he gives a counter argument to that argument. But the point being is that this is a very systematic book on pragmatism that I wish I would have found earlier on when I was studying philosophy. The next book is going to be Chalmers' Philosophy of Mind. The reason I'm going to recommend this book is because philosophy of mind is a very big field. There's been so many writers, so many contributors, and this book will keep it simple for you. It'll go over all the main ideas, all the main essays that you need to know about, and then if you need further readings, there's sources in here. So just because this is really comprehensive, I recommend this. That's the only reason why. Now the last one, I'm not gonna lie, it's not the one I actually wanted to recommend. So it's a companion to the philosophy of language. This series is great, by the way. If you're willing to go through thick, like 800-page books, this is a great series. But the one I do recommend is A.P. Matriarch's The Philosophy of Language. I think there's a 6th edition now. There might even be a 7th. Very solid textbook filled with many essays. I got introduced to the book from John Searle's course at Cambridge. He recommends it on his reading list. It goes over all the main ideas in the philosophy of language. This book does too, but it's a much bigger book. And on top of that, this book isn't like the Matriarch textbook. I hope I'm saying his name right. The textbook will take you through the main essays. It'll give a brief overview of the essay and then give you the actual essay to read, at least a revised version. So that's much better. I think that's a much better approach. So for that reason, I recommend that textbook if you can find it. But if you can't find it, then this is another good one. I'm sure there are tons of good textbooks on philosophy of language. But again, I do recommend a philosophy of language textbook, because without a textbook, it's going to be messy. The field's really, again, wide and has a lot of contributors, as is the case with philosophy of mind. So with that being said, those are my 5 books I suggest to better understand philosophy. Ciao.